Joel Sherman with us on a Thursday, and we're glad because there is a lot going on. When you have expectation, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. That's what my mom always said. And we have expectation for certain teams who did very well last year, but it's early, Joel.
It's very early, and I always try to point out, 2 years ago, the Astros won the World Series. I don't think they get over 500 until August. Last year, the Astros, at about this time of year, were under 500. They won, I think, 106 games in the World Series. So as we do this segment, I just want to say there's 6 playoff teams from last year that are under 500 right now. Most of them will be okay, but why don't we delve into a few?
Okay, let's keep that in mind. The Mariners, an interesting case, 8-11. I think fresh in our mind is how they got into the postseason, right, with the walk-off and all the excitement. As currently constructed right now, are they good enough? What's your early take?
So, again, last year they were a team that struggled for a good part of the season and made a run in the last 2 months and got in the playoffs, ended that long streak. They hadn't made the playoffs since 2001, Lauren. To me, there's 2 things that stand out problematic about them early on. They were great in one-run games these last 2 years. They were 67-41, and we usually think of this as a very fickle stat. If you're good one year, you're probably not the next, but their bullpen had been so good these last 2 years, and Scott Service, their manager, give him credit, seemed to really know how to manipulate them. Again, very small sample size, but 2-5 in one-run games this year, 0-4 in extra innings. Again, at a time where you think your bullpen, the manipulation of it would work well. And they were one of 2 teams that hadn't won a game yet when the opponent scored 4 or more runs. So that speaks to lineup. Colton Wong, a free agent sign, has been one of the worst offensive players in the sport. But I want to go into one place in particular. Their DH production this year, Lauren, 115 batting average, 206 slugging, 206 on base, 180 slugging. They have 0 homers and 1 RBI. They need to get some offense from that spot.
Okay, and they're not afraid to get whatever they need at the deadline. We saw Luis Castillo.
Jerry Dipoto and A.J. Preller are the famous traders in the sport, so they'll probably go out there and try to find it.
And some teams just start slow. I mean, you mentioned the defending champion Houston Astros. They did it last year. For them, they were healthy last year, and depth has been tested this year early.
No doubt about it, Lauren. And of the 5 teams we're going to go through, the one I would say I'm the least concerned about
is the Astros.
Is Houston. Their starting pitching has been great again. And by the way, that's losing the AL Cy Young winner, Justin Verlander. Hunter Brown, who's kind of been known because of the way he throws the ball as maybe a young Verlander, has stepped in and been great. Don't forget, they'll probably get Lance McCullers back. And their lineup has struggled. But they should get Michael Brantley back soon. He begins a rehab assignment this weekend. And Jose Altuve, who, fractured his thumb in the WBC, they should get him back. Early on this season, Abreu has struggled. I think Abreu, even though he's older, is still a good hitter. He'll be fine. Alex Bregman has struggled. Again, I think Alex Bregman will be fine. This team has a pedigree of winning. They are a little more depth challenge than in recent years, but I still think they're the class of that division.
I could ask the same question about the Astros that I'm going to ask you about the Phillies. I used to think that the World Series hangover was just a narrative, but I ask my guys, and they always say, no, it's real, because you're playing into almost November sometimes, right? And then the parade, and then all of that, and you're not relaxing, and then you're not starting up until February with the Phillies. It's hard to look at any team in the NL East, Joel, and say, oh, they're 4th. It means 0, right, in April. But when you look at them from a lens, what do you see so far?
Another team I would remember, they don't really take off until Rob Thompson becomes the manager into the season. And even then, they really not until September do they get into a playoff spot. They make it by 1 game. I want to talk about the hangover on arms. Guys do pitch late into October. Go look at the number for the Phillies. Wheeler, 6 starts, 35 2/3 innings in the postseason. That's, added on to a big workload. 5 starts for Nola in the postseason. Suarez appeared in 5 games, 3 starts. Go look at their numbers this year. 5.91 ERA for Nola, Wheeler 4.79 ERA. Suarez hasn't pitched because of forearm tightness. That is a real thing to add that 7th month to your arm, especially where every pitch is thrown at high pressure, high stress. So I wonder just about the arm hangover here for the season and if they'll be able to overcome it.
No one threw more innings than Nola last year. I think in the Central, we all thought if Wainwright does his thing and Jack Flaherty can be elite. We've heard John Mozeliak say for a couple years now, we're good enough. Right now, what we have in this clubhouse is good enough. Do you see that so far, 3 weeks in?
I don't. Now, I think they're in a division that won't get away from them. I know Milwaukee and the Cubs have played well early on. I figure the Cardinals' pedigree will catch up. But at this moment, the Cardinals are tied for the fewest quality starts in the majors. It's 2. It's both by Jordan Montgomery. You know, Miles Mikolas, after the WBC, after signing an extension, hasn't pitched well. Jack Flaherty has walked 17 and struck out 17. You know, his control hasn't been there. Steven Matz has continued not to be a good free agent signing. Wainwright hasn't pitched yet. He's 41. You know, the hangover for the Cardinals, to me, Lauren, is always going to be this. I wonder how much they would have won, and I'm talking about World Series, if they never trade Marcell Ozuna for Sandy Alcantara and Zach Gallen. Put those 2 aces onto this team, and what does it look like?
Wow. Now you're making me think.
Yeah.
What about the Padres? I have one more before we go, and I want you to look at what Manny Machado said, talking about their slow start. I'd rather this happen now than down the road, Manny Machado said to the offensive slow start. And for anyone who would read too much into 18 games, it's just don't jump on the bandwagon later when we start raking. And we're doing what we're. I missed the word. My mic cut out during that word. And we're supposed to be doing. Jake Peavy was talking how good Manny Machado. Thank you so much for pointing it out. I skipped one. Tatis comes back today. What do you think of the Padres so far?
Look, I think one of the things that gets layered on there, and maybe you hear it even in a little bit in that quote from Manny Machado, is pressure. Right? They were very good last year, and they're the team that everyone is, how are they doing this financially, where they've taken their payroll up to $250, $260, $270 million. They're behind the 2 New York teams for the most. And their offense has struggled this year, and perhaps Tatis Jr. brings both energy and his offense. He just raked for a week in AAA, and it helps. Look, I think Manny Machado is a great player. I think Soto is a great player. They have not hit yet. I would be shocked if they don't hit. But this team carries a burden with it, organizationally, that they've never had in the history of the organization, that they have to win. They have to maximize these guys on these long-term contracts. Those contracts will probably turn bad as they go along. They're all in their prime now. The Dodgers are more susceptible than they've perhaps been in a decade. This is a year the Padres have to win the NL West, and there is a stress that comes.
A pressure that they've never had before is interesting because you talked about the Dodgers or the Yankees. They have it every year. Yeah. They have it, you know, but it's different for the Pods. Thank you so much. You're going to join us a little bit later on. Robert, take it away.
Well, speaking of the Padres, Season of Dreams presented by Mattress Firm. We showed you the highlights earlier from the Padres snapping the Atlanta Braves win streak, the Juan Soto home run, but it was another save for Josh Hader. It's his 5th of the season. The Padres reliever is having a bounce-back season. Remember, he struggled at some points last year, but towards the end of the season and in the postseason, he was nails, and that has carried over to the start of 2023.